applause for all of us. So the time got away from us a little bit, but that's great. That's a very good thing. We have about maybe 5 minutes. I do want to bring folks up, but we can ask a couple of questions if you wouldn't mind going up to the table. One quick thing, she mentioned the demonstrations, and I mentioned the demonstration at Salem State. I will tell you, I've been here for over 30 years, and there was nothing more powerful than being in the quad and seeing those students demonstrate. And that's one thing. The second thing was they made which was more powerful, quite frankly, is they made a demand list and gave it to me and the rest of the senior leadership. And you can bet they held us accountable. And we met most of the demands. Some, we're still working on, but I think we both walked away feeling like, you know what, we came to the table, we agreed on some things, and we moved forward on those things. So I said at the very outset, it's the students who drive the change. The adults mess it up. Okay. We have time for a couple of questions, a couple of mics. Right here.
Okay.
Of course, Tony, you get the first question.
I gotta get on the youth because just like you, it's the youth that drives,
Absolutely.
right? So one of the activities I did with my students was I asked them to gather in groups of 4, and I said, imagine a better school, no rules, go. And I'm shocked, both positive and negative. And I'm gonna ask you to answer that question. Because the youth know, and just like you pointed out, Nate, sometimes we make these decisions, we think we know, we assume, we don't ask. And I want to ask you, what can the schools, whether it's the schools you work at, the college level, or the high school level, be doing better to support the Black and brown voices and success and activism that we're talking about today?
Can I add something on to that?
Sure.
So I work at the same school as Jada, and I've been at that school for 12 years, I think now, 10 years. And I've been through a lot of conferences through Department of Ed. I've been talking to people from a lot of school districts. It's kind of like the difficult conversations that everybody talks about. I think people got very comfortable in that cycle of difficult conversations. I can't see any way out of it sometimes. I just wanted to kind of not frame your question that, but at least have your question touch that as well.
I think definitely having an administration that listens without interrupting, because a lot of times they want to tell you how to feel and tell you how to act, but just having teachers and admin that can support you and listen to you is very important.
Yeah, I agree as well, and just to add to that, I think it's also important if the faculty and the administration, if we see ourselves represented in that. In our school, the faculty and administration is pretty much all white, so to see ourselves represented in the faculty and administration would be a huge help. I think in creating, amity groups and clubs that would be able to support us. I feel like if that faculty and administration were represented in us, that would be a huge help.
Yeah, just to touch on that, our school doesn't have very many Black teachers, so I found comfort with other teachers, but obviously having that representation would mean a lot. Another thing, my school puts on a great face of being a very welcoming and accepting school, but for example, I got the school a Juneteenth flag, and then I just showed up to school and it was up. Like, there was no, any way I could actually be a part of that, ceremony, and I just wish, for the cultural night, that was, the racial equity team that did that. I just wish, it was just a thing that could just happen, and, when our principal was involved in racial equity, I didn't speak at all, because it was just, a little awkward, so as we've come a long way, but I feel like it's just being involved, really, showing that you care.
Definitely to echo what you already brought up about just having staff that reflect the students, from being a Black student that had never had a Black teacher up until college, that totally influenced my internalized anti-Blackness. I had so much internalized anti-Blackness because to me, Black history was slavery, and I didn't want to think about that. I didn't want to think that I was just an enslaved person. But working at schools where I have a majority black staff, and I've also worked at schools where I have a majority white staff, you can see and feel the difference. The students see and feel the difference. So many of them, I am their first black educator, and they bring that up to me. They're like, I can just talk to you differently. We can just relate differently. But there's also a next step, because if you are going to be bringing your black faculty in, what are you doing to support them? What are you doing with your white teachers and your non-black teachers so they know how to support them in the classroom and just in the school? Because I don't want to hear that you're so happy that I'm here only in February, based on a true story. So really, really being reflective on being diverse, but being, what's the word that I'm looking, intentional about it. Don't just hire black folks to hire black folks. Do it because we need diverse staff for students, for staff in general, and be intentional about it.
Yeah, and just really going off that point, I really feel like the educators and administration should know that students can feel your energy, right? We can really feel it. We can see if you just want to check off a box, if you want to say that you can, oh, you listen to black students, now you can go back to your classrooms. We can feel that. So we want administration to really listen to what we're saying. Be intentional with how you're including us, and keep these conversations going. We don't just want it to be a one-off thing. We don't want to be a part of your agenda. We want to have our needs met, and we want to see that change. We really want to see it. We don't want to be like, oh yeah, this is gonna happen in 5 years, 10 years, maybe the next class will see it. We want to have physical results, because we're feeling these physical problems in our classrooms.
I also think I've had a similar experience. I didn't have my first black teacher or professor until I came here as a freshman with Professor Adams. And I think, especially at the university level, one thing I wish and hope the administration takes more into account is I had my first black professor when I was a freshman. I wasn't able to take another. There were other classes, but classes that I wanted with black professors up until my junior year. And a lot of the times here at Salem State, we have professors like our Dr. Jamie Wilson, who is in charge of African American studies here. And he'll offer a course like African American music history. And he says to me, Michael, I need more students to sign up. I only have 10 students signed up for this class, and the university is not going to let me teach it if I don't reach, a certain cap. And I just think that's unfortunate, because for those 10 students, we all chose that class for a reason, because, all of us are black. We want to learn about our own history, about, this history that's often not taught. And for so many other courses and other departments, whether it's psychology, English, history, if it has the connection oftentimes to a topic that isn't necessarily, that doesn't excite our predominantly white institution, the students. It affects the students who are interested in going there, and a lot of the time the students of color. So I think it's important to help support those faculty and to figure out how we can retain them, because that's a huge thing. You can't hire all these people and expect them to work in the system that works against them and then wonder why they leave after a short amount of time. So I think that's another big piece, is working on retaining faculty, professors, teachers, and administrators of color.
Okay, so we have time for one last question, and I'm going to take a little bit of the executive privilege and give it to my friend and mentor, Beth Bauer.
Thank you, Nate. My question is, this is a conference that is talking about diverse history. And there are a lot of people in this room that that's what they study, that's what they teach. That's their interest, they have a lot of expertise, whether it's in research or in other ways. But what I'm hearing is that that's not getting to you necessarily, or that you have questions or are looking for information that you don't have. And so my question is, what are you looking for, and how can you help you?
I think one of the biggest barriers is just access to information. So I think a lot of people are interested in getting involved with stuff like this, getting involved with the community, but we don't necessarily know where to search it out or how to engage. And then I think, I don't know, just there are so many disparities when it comes to trying to get involved, whether it's transportation, you have to, have a ride there, you're stuck working. So I think working to have a variety of things that people can get involved with. Someone mentioned in the earlier panels, having events at times or at places that are most convenient for the community you're trying to reach, not the community that is putting on the event necessarily. So.
But I'm specifically, what is it historically you want to know? In other words, I'm not saying you have to say what that thing is, but if there is a piece of the history of your community or of your heritage that you would like to know more about, there's expertise that can come to you and speak with you and help you and things like that. So it's not just programming, but it's also just transferring knowledge or things like that.
Yeah, I think within our school, something that we notice is the history curriculum is very predominantly white. The world history class that we take in 9th grade, we always say it's not world history, it's European history. So I feel like what we want is we just want the history curriculum and the history standards to be expanded to include the whole entire world. That's where we see ourselves represented, and it's not just in Europe. And so that's what we would want to see in the classroom, because we do not get that.
And to actually be teaching ethnic studies, I taught Black history last year for a year, and it was a struggle to get to teach that class, and I don't get to teach it anymore. So just being able to have this available to students, and I know that's a way bigger thing than just giving the information because it's districts and it's this, but I feel like it shouldn't be that hard. Like in Boston Public Schools right now, it's in their first year of piloting ethnic studies, but the majority of students in Boston Public Schools are Black and brown students. And my one Black history class last year is probably the only time some of these students are going to learn Black history. In the breakout panel that I'm doing after, I'm talking about my own history and talking about how my cousin went to a plantation that our ancestors were enslaved on that she didn't know until years and years later. Like that information should be there. Like we should know our history. We, especially as African Americans, we assume we come from enslaved people, but we don't always know. And there's so much information, but it's just these barriers to the information. So when you have this expertise, I like the way you asked that question, what can I do? What can I do? That's what I want. We talk about allyship, you have to take it on you. I don't want people to think like, go ask the Black people because we want their input. I want you to have our input, but also have action steps. Like I said, don't just rely on our voice, uplift our voice. Use your sources, use your privilege, because a lot of times, if we as Black and brown people talk about it, they're like, oh, it's Black and brown people talking about it. But when white folks speak up about it, oh, I'm like, I guess other people care about it. Maybe I should start caring about it. That's upsetting, but that is the reality. So I guess a lot of it is utilizing your privilege so we can know our history.
And again, also it's about like how students are engaging with it. I feel like history, it's a really tough subject because like people assume that it's only in the past, it doesn't have roots in the future and our current present, but that's obviously not true. And also, I feel like the way we understand and interact with history, again, thinking about all the courses and units I've taken on like American history, like you have, we consider Black history separate from American or US history. Black people have been doing things in this country for like so many years. This isn't separate. It should be part of the curriculum,
Black history is American history.
It's American history, exactly. And so when you have all these Black and brown students sitting in classrooms just hearing about like the white politicians, the white change makers, and they don't get to hear about like the incredible Black excellence, Black achievement, they see that, again, it's another form of alienization, and we just don't see ourselves in the history, and then that's where the disconnect comes. That's where the lack of engagement comes with the younger students. So again, having these ethnic courses and also the Black history courses, like just getting to see our achievements, it creates connections, and it creates that sense of like wanting to learn more and go past the history classroom.
It's definitely important for educators to not just teach about Black tragedy. I feel like we mentioned, most of the time it's just about slavery and massacre. We never learn about the achievements, influential figures, and accomplishments, so I think it's important to teach that.
So I don't remember much of U.S. history because COVID, but what I do remember when it came to how Black people were represented, it was just slavery. And then when I took U.S. history too, it was the 90s and hip hop. So I feel like anytime I've learned about Black history, it's Miss D'Antonio, first of all, she does an amazing job of incorporating it into our curriculum, whether that be like giving us an essay that we can expand on to our interest or a project. Recently I just talked about an activist from the UK who was of color, but I say that to say that as much as we need representation in the teachers, we need it in our curriculum as well. And yeah, I feel like it's a simple issue, but I know that, there's the curriculum that teachers have to meet. But if you put all students into account, then, the teachers will get kids turning in work because they want to learn about specific things, you know what I mean? So I feel like representation just needs to be not only in the who's teaching it, but what's being taught.
Yeah. And just to go off that, sorry, it's a quick point. But again, having that, sorry, but again, I found so much freedom in seeing myself represented. I took an AP language and composition class, and I feel like that sounds really boring, but the way my teacher presented it was that we knew how to form arguments and theses and opinions, but we got to take themes and topics that were relevant to us. So something that was so pivotal in my education and my relationship to learning was that I got to write a thesis paper on intersectionality. Not just some historical event or maybe about the government, its structures. I got to do something that was personal to me. I got to take something and make it special to me. So you can present the history and the students will run with it. We will run with anything that we can find passion and importance in.
Wow, that note.